Hello, everybody. This is Bennett Tchaikovsky, and welcome to another video here where we're going to be going through and talking about some corporations basics. So today we're going to be talking about corporate governance. Articles of incorporation also can be known as a certificate of incorporation. So my disclaimer and copyright notice, and I'm going to read this very carefully because it's extremely important. The information and opinions in this presentation are those of myself and not my employers or affiliated organizations, including but not limited to Irvine Valley College and the South Orange County Community College District. The presentation is for educational purposes only and does not constitute any legal or accounting advice whatsoever. Additionally, starting and running a corporation can involve significant tax consequences. Therefore, make sure you consult a tax advisor and an attorney prior to making the decision to incorporate. Note that in this series, I'll be going over a variety of matters that relates to incorporations and how a corporation operates. You should use this video series to educate yourself on the topic rather than to take this as any sort of legal advice. Therefore, the best way to use this video series is to learn about how corporations work and then go out and seek legal counsel. This presentation is copyright 2008 to 2024 by Bennett Tchaikovsky. All rights are reserved. Any distribution is strictly prohibited. Okay, I'm just going to change this because I can't stand the bag grammar, but there we go. Okay, let's get back to it. So we're going to talk about the articles of incorporation today. So one of the first parts is basically the articles of incorporation. It's in California. It is a relatively simple document. And I'm going to show you some kind of versions of this that have kind of happened over the years. So when we go over here to, I just randomly chose a business. And so over here, you go and look at this Solve Consulting Inc. You'll basically see that it's a California stock corporation, address, mailing address, agent for service of process. And when I view the history, the very initial filing that this corporation will be going through and making is this one right over here. And this is basically something of saying the articles of a corporation of the business. And you can see it's been filed. One, the name of this corporation is number one, Solve Consulting Inc. Two, the purpose of this organization is to engage in any lawful act or activity for which a corporation may be organized under the general corporation law of California, other than banking, the banking business, the trust company business, or the practice of a profession permitted to be incorporated by the California Corporation Code. Three, the name and address of the state's corporation's initial agent for service of process is this person. Corporation is authorized to issue only one class of stock, which shall be designated as common stock. Total number of shares it can issue is this number of shares. Then the numbers of the addresses of the persons who are appointed to act as initial director of the corporation are. Six, the liability of the directors shall be eliminated to the fullest extent under California law. Corporation is authorized to indemnify the directors and officers fullest extent under California law. And what you're going to notice is this is back from 2000, right? As we look at other kind of more recent documents, this is from 2017. Here you've got Boba Inc. Name of the corporation is Boba Inc. Business address, agent for service of process. Why is this agent for service of process really important? Because remember, the corporation is not a person. However, you have to have a person that can be served with papers of a lawsuit. Over here, you either have an individual or a separate business entity doing this. The number of shares you're authorized to issue, right? So if you have to do an amendment with this, you have to write something over here. Total number of shares that can be issued over here. And then you're going to have a purpose statement, right? So again, purpose of the corporation, other than the banking, trust company, or practice of a profession permitted to be incorporated by the California Corporation Code. If you are an attorney or a CPA or any other kind of professional, you're going to have to not only have your corporation registered with the state, but you're also going to have your corporation registered with the California Bar, California Board of Accountancy. So if you are just doing a general corporation for a business you're doing, this is pretty much what you're going to do. However, if you are going through and doing something that happens to be a little bit more complicated, or if you're a professional, you're going to have to follow very specific guidelines. And I'll talk a little bit about that more in the bylaws, but for right now, so we've looked at this one over here. Before we get to Delaware, we've looked at number one solve. And just so you know, kind of over here, what we can also kind of go through and see is that in addition to that articles of incorporation or the certificate of incorporation, that if I just do a search basically for a business and I come over here, let's find someone who's in California, who's still active. Okay, so Forethought Consulting, another limited liability company. That's not what I want. NV Consulting Inc. Stock, let's see this one. This looks like a winner. So you would basically see over here that they are going to have an initial filing, which would be over here. They're a foreign corporation. I messed that one up. Hold on. Just give me a second. Okay. So you've got the basic articles of incorporation in California. You also have to file something called a statement of information. The statement of information, as you can kind of go through and see right over here, this generally has to be filed annually. What's the corporation's name? What's the principal address? What's the mailing address, street address? And then who are the officers of the corporation? Now you can have one person doing everything. So it's not like a publicly traded company where you're seeing more people in different positions. But over here, you've got like, okay, he can also be the director. This is for a company called Oak Consulting. And again, I just pulled this off of the Secretary of State's website. So this is basically what you kind of will go through and see as we're, trying to basically, as we're going through and as a corporation, you'll have to kind of go through and basically when you choose to be a corporation, that's an example of the type of filing you have to kind of go through and keep up with. So the other thing that I want to kind of show you as well. So again, articles can be relatively plain. Okay, so especially since over here, there's only one class of stock, can be pretty simple. And they don't call it, basically, they're not going to call an article of incorporation or articles. They're going to call it a certificate of incorporation. And I think what California may be doing that as well. I'm used to when I ever hear the term article, if I go over here and look at this, the initial filing, let's just pull this up real quick. Articles of incorporation, right? So that's what California calls it, right? But Delaware calls it something a little bit differently. And what they're going to call this is a certificate of incorporation of a stock corporation. And so you'll see this over here is like, well, in Delaware, this is what you have to go through and fill out. So it has a lot of the same information. And so again, you're just saying, hey, we're incorporated, boom. And this is going to be publicly available for everyone to go through and see. That's very, very important to remember. Now, let's kind of go through and look at some other documents, right? And this is an example of Meta platforms. And the way I went through and found this is that, and I'll share with you a link to this, but when we come over here and we're basically like looking at when a company chooses to go public, right? They have to file everything. So, which is good for us because when I make these videos, we're going to be able to look at, oh, here are the bylaws of Meta platforms, right? Here are the different bylaws of how this corporation is going to go through and operate. So when you become publicly traded, there's a disadvantage of everybody's going to see everything you're doing. But what's great for us is we get to actually look under and see what's happening. It's exciting stuff. So you'll see over here, like, oh, Mark Zuckerberg, this is his offer letter. This basically back from 2012. And letter restates the employment letter, and here's your base wage, all your other things. So you'll see these different filings that these you have to make as being an officer or be as a company. And when you're publicly traded, you got to file, you got to show everything. If it's material, you got to show it, especially when you go through and go public, which is a really big consideration for you when you're making that choice to go down that path. But let's go back to the articles of incorporation or the certificate of incorporation. Now, remember, once this is filed, you can always go back and amend it, right? If you see over here, if I'm looking at, say, if I look over here, I'm going to look at the Home Depot. Let's see here. Hold on. If I went to the Home Depot and I decided to look at, what the heck is this? This is something else. Hold on. Oh, here we go. All right. So if I looked at the Home Depot, and I can tell you when the Home Depot was initially formed, they did not authorize 10 billion shares. It was probably something much, much lower, right? You would never start authorizing that many shares to be issued. So what can happen is as your companies grow and as your needs kind of go through and change, you go back and you can restate your art certificate of incorporation. And as we have over here, you're going to see this for Meta platforms or Facebook, and this is in 2012, the 11th amended and restated certificate of incorporation. So right over here, it was initially incorporated, filed as the Facebook. Certificate of incorporation shall be amended and restated as follows, right? Name of the corporation, address of the corporation, the purpose of the corporation, and then the different classes of stock. You're also talking about if you do a stock split, reverse or forward, you have to go through and restate these amount. You have to go through and restate this. Rights over here, preferred, authorized by the restated shall be divided into a series as provided herein. Series A preferred, series, all this different stuff. So what you really can do is as things change, you change your filing documents, right? As long as the board of directors is going through and approving such changes, you can go through and make these, right? And sometimes you have to get approval from the shareholders. It depends on what it is. But again, that's why you go seek legal counsel. So when we're starting out with articles of incorporation or a certificate of incorporation, it's going to be pretty simplistic. But as we move along and as we further develop, and I think I went through down over here, and let me see if I pulled it up for Snap. Oh, in any event, you'll basically, you'll basically see the articles of incorporation. So if I say, okay, say Daniel and I start a corporation and we have 500,000 shares authorized. And then someone comes up to us and say, we want to invest in this company, we want an equity stake, and we may not have enough shares. So we would go back and we would basically amend our certificate of incorporation or the articles of incorporation to reflect basically the new additional shares being authorized. So all of those kinds of things, when you are starting a corporation, the articles are generally going to be very simplistic. Remember, it's going to be publicly available. You're basically telling the world that you are now a corporation. And just remember, as your needs as a corporation change, you can go back and later amend them. But that's when you want to talk to an attorney about, oh, do I need to have a board vote for this? Do I not need to have this? If I authorize more shares, Do I pay a higher franchise tax in Delaware? There's a lot of things to kind of go through and consider again when you're doing this, but this is generally a relatively simple document compared to other ones that are around. So I want to thank you for being with me here today, and I look forward to seeing you on future videos. If you have any comments, please feel free to leave them below. I thank you for liking and subscribing to the channel. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please feel free to leave them for me at 1812cpa@gmail.com. Have a great day.